All right, Jamal Finkley, Black Tree TV. I'm here with David Diggs. Yo, it's been a second, man. I remember we covered you on Blind Spotting,
Yeah.
and which brings me to my first question. I remember when you was doing Blind Spotting, it was yeah, I worked on that project for 10 years,
Yeah.
and it finally came. And now after all of your success with Hamilton and Blackish, and Snowpiercer, all this stuff that you're doing, you're getting so many projects coming faster and faster. How does that feel as an artist to not have that as long a tail as you did at the beginning, have all these projects like coming up on you like this?
Yeah, it's good. It's I mean it's definitely good to have work and I feel very fortunate that people are presenting me really interesting work, really things that I'm excited about. But it is kind of a double-edged sword. You know, as a creator, getting to take that much time with something, you know, is the that was the only new way I knew how to make something great. So now it's about like how do I make something great in a much faster rate and try to sort of still honor the project. So I'm like getting into the production space a lot more and starting to solve those riddles for myself. Blind Spotting just got greenlit as a TV series, and we're already in pre-production over at Stars. So
Oh,
we start
wow.
shooting very soon. So it's yeah. So it's just you're right. It's much faster, and there's a learning curve there, and there's a things I have to learn about the different ways to participate in making art. You know.
There was a lot of revelations. I'm not sure, how much of it was part of McBride's, storytelling and how much was true. But there's a lot that I learned about Frederick Douglass and your portrayal of him. Like, what did you learn as you took on the character that you didn't know about uh, this guy before?
I mean, so much because McBride put a lot in there, and also like I ended up having to do a lot of research. So you know, that I didn't know the fact that Douglas had a wife and a mistress. I did not know that. My knowledge of Frederick Douglass was pretty limited to the one autobiography I had read, and then the few lines of whatever in a history. But the more like fascinating thing about him was um, in reading a lot of his autobiographies, watching him tell the same story over and over again over time, and watching how he changed the story to adapt it to the audience, um, and also to reflect his changing views on his own life. He was someone who was always mining his own life for political rhetoric, right? He was using his particular story as a way to get people on the side of abolition. And so watching him sort of refine his own life story, like using his life as a primary source, like a piece of history that he was retelling and reframing in order to get people to act, was really that's a really interesting way of thinking about a person, and it's kind of a tribute to his intellect and also his sort of focus on his mission. Yeah.
Yeah. After doing, all those runs of Hamilton and telling the fascinating stories of Alexander Hamilton and Lafayette and all the other characters, do you feel like there could be a Douglas and something where just talking about Frederick Douglass and his history in the same type of fashion?
Yeah, I mean, his history is fascinating. There's certainly plenty there, way more than you'd be able to cover in any like reasonably length thing. So, and I think, and you know what we don't talk about Douglas was that he was the most photographed person of his time. Like he was a rock star. That was the most famous dude in the world. More people knew what Frederick Douglass looked like than anybody else, and he was the reason that he wrote so many autobiographies because people would get them. They could get all over the world. Everybody was hungry for Frederick Douglass content, right? So to be that kind of famous, and to have this mission of abolition is like a really it is a fascinating story. So I don't know if someone will try to do that with it, but like it's certainly there. There's a lot there. It is a true like rock star's journey in a lot of ways.
What's the, because you're also a writer, and what's the danger of, or what's the complications of telling a story about slavery and telling it in a serious fashion and not having it be all the way dark and have to have light moments when we as in reflection look at slavery in total dark, just total dark period. Like how's that creative in making this story and still having fun moments, but knowing the overall theme of it is heavy.
I mean, yeah, I think what you know what McBride's really brilliant at is that like to if you just acknowledge it as truth, and then you look at how people actually live through hardship. I say this all the time. I grew up poor but not sad. I don't actually ever remember being sad or bored or anything like that. I was very happy as a kid, right? My life wasn't easy, but there was so much joy. I laughed so much. And when you look at people who come from struggle, there's a lot of joy there. There's a lot of laughter there. And so to ignore that, to say that the context that we're living in means that everything was tragedy, tragedy and comedy are right next to each other. And it's all about perspective. And so what was so brilliant about the way McBride told this story is if you tell it through the lens of this teenage boy, like coming of age, so many things look ridiculous to him and they are honest reflections of what's happening. This idea that like being John Brown emancipated him, right? We think about emancipation as a good thing. He emancipated him by killing his father. Like it's like it's a horror, it's a horrific story. And then this kid Onion who is just trying to survive and maybe like have like kiss a girl and like learn what love is, do things that kids try to do, is also living in the world as it was at the time. And all of the people he meets, you know, Onion isn't judging anybody and is not aware of creating history. And I think that's what's really instructive about McBride's work, is to be like, history was lived through. It isn't the history that we know as a dark period is a thing that we created as a messaging tool. And it was a dark period, and it's responsible for so many of the problems that we see in our country right now. The history of slavery is responsible for that, but you can't change it if you don't acknowledge it, right? So McBride instead says, look right at it and like laugh at it. Laugh at what is ridiculous about this practice. Laugh at what was ridiculous about trying to change it. Laugh at all of the ridiculous things. And then you really honor that it was real, right? It doesn't, it's not, it feels real. It doesn't feel like a thing that you can point at and be like, that was then, this is now. That was just people living in America, and America still has a ton of work to do.
Well, congratulations on all your work. I'm glad you got greenlit for a series for Blind Spotting and everything else.
Thank
Can't
you.
wait to see anything you do. So keep on doing it. We'll keep on watching, brother.
Jamal, I appreciate you, bro.